Welcome to the Underhive Workshop. I am Goblin King, and today we will be taking our first dip into the world of fantasy terrain. This is a single-story building that I prototyped out yesterday to use for this tutorial that is built to work within a fantasy setting. So that could be something like Age of Sigmar, Mordheim, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, or even your favorite role-playing game setting. This is just a single-story farmhouse. Got a little bit of damage, a little bit of dilapidation. This is the basic structure. I like to lay these out before I come up with how I'm going to run the tutorial. I'm currently organizing our terrain builds into two different categories. We'll have the Urban Warzone category, which will fall into stuff that would be used on a city fight table as I gear up to build a city fight table. And then we'll be doing a Bloody Road to Mordheim series that will focus on fantasy terrain as I'm moving towards building a Mordheim table. These series are designed to teach a lot of the fundamentals behind the tools and the tips and the building principles when it comes to how I approach building terrain. As we get closer to the end of Series 1 or Season 1, however it ends up working out, I will be moving into and transitioning into doing some modular builds. I'll build an entire 12x12 segment or several 12x12 segments, and those will be a little bit more... those will be a little bit less focused on the teaching tips and a little bit more focused on the building montages. So you guys will get to see a lot of the stuff that I cover in these episodes put together into how I approach building a large piece. So the aim for today is to create a single-story farmhouse or cottage. So we're going to create a 6x8, 5x7, somewhere around that lines. We're going to have, let's say, 5-inch by 7-inch base, and then we're going to come in about an inch, and we're going to lay out the house itself. So the house is going to end up being 4-inch by 6-inch. We're going to give it first floor. We're going to come in and do the kind of loft second floor. So there won't really be a second floor, so to speak, or a full second floor. There'll just be a platform, and then there'll be a steeped roof that goes across. We'll put a door in. We'll put a window in to the other side. And we'll do some detailing, and then of course, since it's going to be in a war game, we'll do some ruined aspects. So we'll tear off a chunk of the roof, and then maybe we'll tear a couple of holes in the wall, which is good because then it kind of really lets you get your figures in there, your hands in there. And then of course, since we're going for that kind of European thatch build style, there'll be supports everywhere, wood beam supports holding up those kind of mud walls, so to speak. And then in the areas that we do damage, we'll do some detailing on the inside and all of that. But that's essentially what we're looking at doing. A very simple house structure. So just like with the ruined building that we did in the last build, what we're going to want to do with this one is we're going to want to give a little bit of height to everything as far as kind of convincing people of how, making sure that it looks about right. So in the modern setting, or the postmodern setting, the science fiction setting, I usually do 3-inch tall walls. In this case, I'm actually going to go a little bit shorter. So I'm going to do 2 3/4 of an inch high. And then for the roof, I'm even going to go shorter, because a lot of these barn style houses that have these pitched roofs, the roof loft area, the area where the kids would have slept, or where maybe there would have been an office or something, some storage, they were a lot shorter. So the peak, the midpoint, is only going to be 2 inches tall. So with that in mind, let's break down the cuts we're going to need. All right, so let's go over our cut lists. As I mentioned, we're doing a 6 by 8 inch base. meaning that our building is going to be 4 inches by 6 inches because we're going to come an inch in from our base all the way around. So as I mentioned, different from when I work on science fiction buildings, these are going to be a little bit shorter. So they're going to be 2 3/4 of an inch tall by the north and south facing ones will be 6 inches long because we're losing an inch on each side. And then our east and west facing walls would be 4 inches, but since our material is 1/8 of an inch thick, we're actually going to subtract 1/4 of an inch, an inch for each side from that 4 inches, which is going to bring us down to 3 3/4 of an inch. Important to remember. Then we're going to need a flat roof or a flat subroof. So that is going to be 4 inches by 6 inches. It's going to match the footprint of the building. Then we're going to need to make our steeple pieces, our triangles. So those are going to be 3/4 of an inch long. Going to come up from the center 2 inches. We're not going to go up 2 3/4. We're only going to go up 2. And then we're going to make that into a triangle. And that's it. Those are all the pieces we're going to cut. So we're going to need one base. So one piece at 6 inch by 8 inch. We're going to need a north and a south facing wall. So 2 3/4 of an inch by 6 inch. We need 2 of these. We're going to need 2 of the 2 3/4 by 3 3/4 inch east and west walls. We're going to need 1 subfloor, so that's 4 inch by 6 inch. And then we're going to need 2 of these triangle pieces. The easiest way to cut this triangle piece is going to be to cut a 2 inch tall by 3 3/4 of an inch long piece. We're going to cut 2 of those. And then we'll find the center of this rectangle. That's where we'll put in our line, and that's where we'll draw our shape. So we'll do that. I'll show you how to do that as we're cutting. So that's our cut list. All right, so for tools and materials, we are going to need my favorite tool, the metal square ruler. We're going to need a utility knife. We're going to need a hobby knife just in case. We're going to need a sanding stick. You're going to need a couple of implements to mark with. I'll be marking in white like normal because it shows up a little bit better on camera. Then wire cutters are optional. Probably won't actually use them this time. A hot glue gun, like always. PVA glue to do some of the detail work a little bit later on. And then instead of relying on the wire cutters like I have in the past, I'm actually going to pull out a tool that I had lost. I knew that I had it and I knew that it was super useful, but I couldn't find it. And this is the Midwest Products Easy Cutter. And this is a pretty cool guy. So it's got this big blade on one side. It's like a big razor blade. And then it basically ends in this cutting surface, this cutting plate. And this cutting plate has a bunch of measurements on it, and then it also has a bunch of angles on it. And what makes this nice is that if you have material like a popsicle stick, which I would normally cut with the wire cutters, I can actually load it up in. I can put it right here at this 45-degree angle, and I can cut it, and I have a 45-degree angle right there. If I don't have something at a 45-degree angle, I can lay it, or if I don't want something cut at the 45-degree angle, I can lay it at the standard angle, and I can cut a 90-degree, and I get a nice, clean 90-degree cut. I don't get one size crimped like I do with the wire cutters. Just a very, very handy tool. For materials, we will be using gator board. This is an 8x8 piece, so I'll be measuring this down. I then have a couple of pieces that can be used to make walls, and a larger piece that I can make a couple of my other cuts out of. This should probably serve me pretty well. I usually order this material in 48 by 96 inch sheets, and then I cut what I need out of it. Usually I cut it down to 12 by 12 sheets, and then as I work on larger terrain projects, I work with these extra pieces, these cast-off pieces, and I just kind of put them into a bin so I can pull from them later. So that's why you guys haven't seen me go back to a 12 by 12 sheet or a much larger sheet, because I just happen to have a bunch of stuff kind of prepped for what I want to do. Really important for this build is popsicle sticks. And I went ahead and already cut off all of the ends on these. I'm not going to be using them as shingles in this tutorial, but I will be using them in a future tutorial. And then my favorite material, chipboard. And this is a old cereal box. So this will be cut up to be shingles. All right, so we're going to get into cutting and prepping all of the material for the build. So first off, I'm going to measure out and make all the cuts on my gator board. Remember how to find that center. We're going to go ahead and do a diagonal line from corner to corner. We're going to find the middle. We're going to draw a straight line. That's our center. All right, now we get to a little bit of the storytelling. So we want to put a door in one of these walls, and we want to put a window in one of these walls. So I think we're going to go with the south and east facing, the east and west facing walls to put a window and a door in. All right, so to make a door, we're going to come in an inch from the edge, and we're going to use the thickness of the skinny chunk of the ruler to cheat a little bit. And then we're going to go an inch and a quarter. And we're going to go an inch and a quarter because these Chaos Marauder bases are about an inch. These dwarf bases are about 3/4 of an inch, and these round bases are about an inch. So we've got an Empire pikeman from the War Masters game by Milton Bradley. It was licensed Games Workshop game, but released by Milton Bradley. So this even predates Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Then I got a dwarf from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and I have a Chaos Marauder from Warhammer Fantasy Battle here to kind of check sizes. Now, as I'm working on my Soulblight Gravelords, I'll tell you right now, the Mother of Monsters will not fit through this door, but she doesn't have to fit through this door. She's a monster model. She's not going to be able to just fit through any old door. She probably would, honestly, because if the model was rendered in 3D and all that, she would just bend over and come in one claw at a time or whatever. But my Death Rattle skeletons are going to be able to fit through this door. My Dire Wolves are going to be able to fit through this door. You know, even my Vergasts would probably be able to fit through this door. So even as I'm building my Soulblight Gravelords and kind of going a little bit for the monster side build, a lot of the units in that Age of Sigmar army are still going to be able to pass through this door. Another thing, I put this door off center because when you put doors and different elements directly in the center, it has a tendency to look kind of weird off center. It just makes it feel a little bit more natural, a little bit more like somebody may have actually lived here. Now what I can do at this point, if I wanted to, is I could put a small window in on this side. And in this case, since I'm going to be lining the edges with popsicle sticks, I'm going to be lining and doing a bunch of detail. I'm going to use a popsicle stick to figure out what that distance is going to be. And then again, I'm going to have to figure out what that distance from the wall is going to be, because there's going to be a popsicle stick on this wall. And since we're already using the popsicle stick, we might as well use the popsicle stick to mark the top. And then for the bottom of that window, we'll come an inch off the ground, because that just seems about logical. Kind of a really small window, so I just cheated a little bit. Let's make it a little taller. We do the detail work. There'll be a way to get around that, and let's go a little bit. So we'll kind of go like that. So there's a little window for the front. So this back wall, in case you weren't wondering, I could draw the little window symbol, right? There we go. There, Bill Gates lives in that. All right, so for the back wall, we are also going to come up an inch from the bottom. We're going to come in an inch from the side because it feels right. I'm going to offset it, though. It's going to be the other side. Oh, no, it's not, because if I'm going to put it together... Oh, look at that. Okay. We're doing it anyway. Then, let's make it a pretty big window. So I'm going to use the thick side of the ruler, which is 1.5, not 2.5, 1.5 inches, just to put in a bit of a construction line. Pretty big window, so we'll drop it by the width of a popsicle stick, but we'll definitely make it 1.5 inches wide. And then just like on the other one, we'll drop the bottom by just a bit. And again, I'm doing some of this on feel, some of this on just gut instinct, what I think is going to look good. I'm trying to keep in mind that when I fully assemble this, there's going to be edge piece details. So you kind of want to play around with that. Almost ends up being in the center of this, doesn't it? It's just a little offset. So with that in mind, come in just a little bit, come over just a little bit, again, to get that off-center feel. This is a house that's been in this guy's family for generations. The windows aren't normal. All right, so that kind of lays that out. So I'm going to cut all of those pieces out and the second floor out. We'll be back. All right, now we are going to use some teacher's tack, or you can use a couple of little tiny dots of super glue or tiny dots of hot glue, kind of up to you. But I'm going to use a little bit of teacher's tack just to roughly assemble it. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to try to figure out where I'm going to put all of my damage. So I'm just going to use little pieces of teacher's tack to hold these little, not these little, but to hold these various pieces together. All right, so there we go. There's our little house, put our little loft roof on. Now, real quick, if we want to, it's a box. We've successfully made a box. Okay, so as far as telling the story of damage, we're going to say that one of the meteors that came down into the city of Mordheim hit this building, and it hit this building kind of coming this way. So it came down through the roof, coming through this wall and out this way. So there's a big gouge and slash in this wall, almost cut completely in half, all the way to the base, rips almost all of it out, and we get a little bit of an overhang. I'm going to have some spider damage going this way. Wow, Mordheim or fantasy buildings are usually brick or some sort of stacked stone, like flagstone, and then it's covered with like mud or some sort of adhesive barrier, maybe some hay and then an adhesive barrier, so when it breaks, it's not going to break clean. It's kind of going to break chunky and ragged. A lot like when we made the Urban Warzone piece and we kind of looked for those ragged chunks and those ragged edges as we started to add some damage to the edges. Same idea here. So again, the meteor came down, it hit the roof, so I'm going to have to take the damage up into the roof when I get to that point. Tore all of this out. I'm coming over here. So then a fire spread. Meteor did the damage. The fire overtook a large chunk of the roof. Overtook a large chunk of the roof and then maybe kind of ate down into another part of the building. So let's damage out this corner too. This damage is going to be a little bit more localized just to this corner, a little less extreme. It's not going to tear quite as much of the building out. And of course, when you're doing this stuff, I'm using the meteor, but it could be a cannonball, it could be chaos magic, it can be pretty much whatever you want. Dwarves have some crazy black powder stuff. Maybe there was black powder stored inside this building. Who knows? But that gives me that, so I can start working on some of my details. And, a good other thing to keep in mind is that if people are going to be putting their units inside the building and there's a roof on top of it, you're going to want to be able to reach into that. So, speaking of the roof, we'll put that subfloor in, or that subroof in. So that meteor came down and hit here and then wrapped out. So there is going to be a matching case of damage up here. And we're going to go even more extreme. We're going to have it pour a huge chunk out. And as that fire, that other damage spread. So I'm just trying to match up the damage that I've already put onto other places, make it kind of feel the same. I think I'm going to get rid of this overhang a little bit. Overhangs don't always look the most natural, so sometimes you just got to even though it looks cool, you got to get rid of it. Temporary adhesives are really good for things like this because you can pre-assemble what you're doing with the temporary adhesive and kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. And then you can lay all your pieces flat again for going in and cutting them and doing the damage. If you were to pre-assemble it and then cut on it, you might get a little bit more of a natural feel as far as the design process goes. You're kind of designing in the moment. You're not pre-planning and then coming back, but you do lose a little bit of that flexibility. However, as I kind of line these up flat, they do also sort of match up, so you can do that as well. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut all my damage out, and then we'll do primary assembly. All right, so on to assembly. For these, I am going to glue the south and north facing walls that we had talked about. So the south and north facing, and this is north, to the outside, because that's how I measured. So if I glue them all right, they'll fit into this without going over the line. If I were to glue them on the inside, they'd end up being too long, because these are the faces that I took that extra quarter inch out of. But oh no, what about the roof pieces? I hear you guys shouting. Well, now we're going to do the roof pieces. So that guy's good to there. However, this other guy did not fare as well. Lots of damage happened over here. So I'm going to try to make sure that it's lined up with the other one, and then I'm going to glue it in place. One last detail that needs to be done is I want to put some sort of beam at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure my distance between both of these, which gives me 5.5. I'm going to take this scrap from this build already, one of the pieces that I'm not using, and I am going to cut it at 5.5. And then once I've cut it at 5.5, I am going to cut 2 1/4-inch by 5.5-inch pieces. And then I'm going to glue those together to make my top beam. I lied. We're going to go with 1/2 inch, 2 5-inch, 2 1/2 inch by 5-inch pieces, which are going to be glued together to make our top beam. So with that beam added, we have our first piece of detail, and now it's time to add all the rest of the detail. So pretty simply, what we're going to do is we're going to cut a bunch of these popsicle sticks to the height that we need, and we're going to use them to edge all these different details. So the first ones we're going to do are going to be the ones that run up the sides, and we are going to cut them to the top of the first piece. So they're going to be 2 3/4 long, because we're actually going to come around later and edge the entire top of those with another popsicle stick. So that will actually run along the top of the subfloor. This is kind of one of those go as you feel, do what you think looks right. But when you look at a lot of medieval architecture, a lot of these old buildings, stuff that we have that survives, they've got these wood beam corner pieces that hold whatever the walls that exist are, or maybe they'll have bricks on the edges. We're doing wood beam. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up all those details and start getting them applied. This is where this tool comes in really handy, because I can go ahead and lay it on the 90-degree angle, get my nice smooth bottom cut, and then I can put this piece up against it, figure out where I need it to be. I can come back in with my pen, make my mark, and then you can actually lay a couple of different pieces next to each other like this to get the cut that you want along both pieces. I generally don't do that, but you could save a little bit of time. So I'm going to cut all the pieces up that I need, and I'm going to get them applied to the sides for detail. So as I was putting all of these details on, you probably noticed a couple of things. First off, the corners that were damaged, I went ahead and damaged the corner wood as well, so it matches. Same with this top wood. This one I actually ripped up quite a bit to give it a little bit more of an authentic feel. And that's just sort of stuff, play it by ear, play it by your gut, really, in a lot of ways, however you think it's going to look better. These top pieces I cut to match the triangle. This split as I was cutting it, so I just kept the split, use it to tell the story. For the window sidings, instead of doing these big thick ones, I cut popsicle sticks in half. And then for the bottoms, I make sills. And I figured I would show you that live here. But again, just match the damage all the way around. So for this bottom window, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a popsicle stick and I'm going to measure my distance, just like every other time that I've done this. Both of these edges are ragged, so I'm going to true up an edge first. The clippers are really good. I use the clippers to get all my sort of raw, jagged edges. And then I'm going to figure out where that guy is. So it's about right there. I'm going to go ahead and cut it. I'm going to cut it a little bit on the inside just in case. Sometimes it's a little too tight. I'm going to give it a quick sand on each side just to make sure that there's not something sticking out. And then instead of putting it flat like that, I'm going to lay it in so it makes a sill. So instead of laying it flat on the bottom to frame it out, I'm going to lay it flat. Instead of laying it flat against the side of the building like this, I'm going to lay it flat into the recess so it's perpendicular to the base, so it gives that illusion of a windowsill. And already there's a lot of detail that's popped off just in going ahead and laying those pieces in, and it does two jobs for you. The first job it does is it covers up a lot of those seams in the foam core. You can no longer see. I've put detail covering all of the seams in the foam core. I'm not really worried about details like this where there's seams in the wood splits, because that happens naturally. That's something that happens when you build with wood. So I'm not super worried about that, but I've hidden all of the big seams. It gives the building a little bit more of like a reinforced, realistic perspective. I made sure that I could reach my hand all the way in. You guys will have seen that earlier. I can also kind of reach up here. Again, dwarf can stand on the second floor if he wants to. The human probably can too. Oh yeah, the human definitely can. The Chaos Warrior, it's a little bit of a tight squeeze, but you're not really supposed to. The idea, these second floors would have been where like the kids slept or something, so they're not exactly like someplace where people are going to be a lot. Maybe the animals slept up there. Maybe there was a little bit of extra stuff up there. All the guys can fit inside. At one point, there probably would have been a ladder that came to this second floor. It would have been, probably in one of these corners that's destroyed. And we can go ahead and really easily create a ladder using these popsicle sticks. So using it and splitting it in half, you get that really nice, thin, half size, essentially, popsicle sticks. And it's ragged, and that's fine. If you want, you can clean it up with a sanding stick, or you could get a much more precise cut if you use an X-Acto blade. But for making these little ladders, this works really well. So there you go. Then you're going to want to essentially get a bunch of pieces that, a bunch of pieces that they would use for ladder rungs. So I kind of figure out about how wide I want it to be. So a cutting mat, that's 1 inch. So I'm going to make it about 1 inch wide from edge to edge. I'm going to mark off my first piece. I'm going to use my clippers to just cut up a bunch of different little pieces. Really simple. I just split a couple of toothpicks in half, cut all of my rungs, made a very, very crude ladder, something that may have either been in the home originally or maybe the people that are storming it. And then I'm going to add it somewhere, you know. And it doesn't have to be in the building. It doesn't have to be something that looks like it was put there on purpose. Maybe it looks like it was pulled all the way up and hidden. Maybe it's part of the floor. Maybe it looks like it fell down, so it's down in the bottom. It's just trying to figure out how to tell that story. And I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to put it on the outside, just kind of leaning up. I know that there's going to be a hole in the roofing tiles over here, so I think I'm going to put it right there. And now you've got a reason or a way that troops are getting to that second floor. There's an obvious way that your longbowman or your sniper, you know, your dwarf sniper or whoever you're using, your ranged expert could get to that second floor and be ready to rain crossbow bolts down onto the next city block here in Mordheim. The next big part of this build, and this is probably the longest part, but in my opinion, one of the most rewarding parts of builds like this is doing the roofing tiles. So we're going to set this guy aside, just back there for a second, and we're going to move on to chipboard, our last material. And there's a lot of different theories on doing roofing tiles. You know, there's a million guys that'll tell you a million different ways to do roofing tiles for terrain. I have done several different methods, and the method that I think looks the best is to take the ends of the popsicle sticks, the little rounded shingles, the little edge of the popsicle sticks. But that kind of gets to that building style that I was mentioning earlier. You know, some buildings are going to look a lot more finished. They're going to look a lot less like a peasant's cottage. They're going to look a little bit more like an inn. And you reserve, in my mind, that extra technique for those centerpiece buildings. And we're going to do a centerpiece building. I'm going to do a longer montage video where I kind of use a bunch of these different little things to make an inn. What I've found looks the best is to do 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch tiles. And I prefer 1/2 inch tiles. I've done 1/4 inch tiles before. So now that I've squared up my chipboard, I'm going to mark off 1/4 inch all the way down. I'm going to measure in a second place, lower on the material. I'm going to measure a 1/4 inch out again, all the way across. I'm going to give myself a 3rd row just to be safe. Measure 3 times, cut once. And then I'm going to cut a bunch of these strips. And just like we did before, just like we did in one of the earlier, I think maybe Scatter Terrain 101, one of the earlier terrain builds that I did, I cut a bunch. Oh, no. I'm sorry. So in the Conics box build, I cut a bunch of strips like this. And this is always handy, you know, if you've just finished a big build and you still have 15 minutes left on your podcast, or 15 minutes left on the tutorial you're watching, or 15 minutes less on the TV show you're watching, or whatever, that's the time to just lay a bunch of these out and cut a bunch of these and just have them at your ready, you know, to the side, ready to go as soon as you need them. Step 2 is a little bit more fun, and it's a little bit faster. I had mentioned earlier that these Midwest Easy Cutter, and pretty much any of these razor cutters that you can find, they'll go through multiple pieces at once. So what I do is I stack everything that I just cut, and I'm going to lay it in here, and I'm just going to vary my size, and I'm going to cut as many tiles as I can in one go. It's important to vary size, but you always want to be sticking closer to square than to elongated rectangle. The elongated rectangle pieces can work on certain builds, but unless you do them all as elongated rectangles, and by elongated I mean like almost twice the size of a square, getting close to twice the size of a square, you kind of like, you lose the definition of what you're trying to do. As you can see, since I cut up several different sheets, I am just making a lot of roofing tiles at one point. The reason that I prefer to do roofing tiles on these kind of cottagey builds with chipboard is because they're not as rigid as the popsicle stick pieces. And the popsicle stick pieces being super rigid is nice, but to me it kind of suggests more like a terracotta and less this like thatched, or not thatched, but like wood shingled roof. So I want to do wood shingle roof for this. So here is the important part, or the important part of this method. You're going to start at the bottom and go up. You're not going to start at the top and go down. If you look at shingles, the way that they're laid, the lowest row is laid first. And that's because they have to overlap each other so water would run off. So to help myself out a little bit, I'm going to add a midway support, maybe another piece of wood or something that would have been laid into the roof. Obviously, the one on the other side is going to be gone. There's not even a mid support on the other side. I didn't even put a mid-building support. And I'm going to line these up pretty closely. So I'm going to put that right about there. I'm just going to tack it down on the top and bottom. I'm going to put it in a little bit because this edging piece is damaged, so part of it's missing. So a lot of the roofing tiles that would be on this side are going to be lower, or maybe even flapped into the building. They're not going to be out and about. But yeah, now it's just time to take these roofing tiles and apply them to the building and kind of tell a little bit of a story of what happened to the top. Again, you know, meteor came in like this and tore into the roof, so there's going to be a lot of roofing tiles where my hand is here. There's going to be a little bit here. I'm pretty much going to get something that's going to look similar to that as far as coverage goes. And then this area that burned away, I'm going to have just a few tiles, maybe some tiles over the top. The angled type pieces that go at the top are going to be left over. And then this area is probably going to be the most full. It's going to suggest the most roof, but it'll still probably have quite a bit missing. And it's just really about telling an interesting visual story. The only important part of shingles is you're going to start at the bottom and you're going to lay up rather than starting at the top and laying down, because you want them to look like they're over. The topmost ones need to overlap the bottommost ones. Another little tiny tip, not so much something you have to do, but a tip is that when you're gluing them, put the glue only on the out and the down side. So if I was going to glue this here, I'm going to put it as far out to the edge and as far down as I can, because when I do overlaps later, like if I get to that second rank and I want to actually slide that under, I need room to push it under. Cue the roofing montage. All right, so there we go. All the roofing tiles are on. Tried to tell a little bit of a story. Obviously, that impact happened there. Could either be a meteor, maybe a cannon or whatever. If I were to set this up on a table, I could put the weird stone scatter token, the thing that the guys in Mordheim are trying to get inside if I wanted to. Just kind of a cool little building. Can still access that partial second floor, especially with smaller units. They still fit in there. And the bottom floor is completely accessible. Be good if you had some gutter runners or something that you wanted to put up on that second floor that are doing some ranged attacks or something kind of spooky and fun. You'll notice as I worked, I damaged some of the tiles. I took my hobby knife, very, very sharp new hobby knife, and just kind of cut into some of the tiles. I also bent a lot of them out, kind of curled them up to suggest that there was some extra damage. I did a lot more on this side because this side is the side that the impact would have happened on. However it worked out, maybe it landed here. It really sort of depends. So that is the house, with the ruined house with the roof on. So the very last thing that we have to do is we have to put some texture onto it. This stuff, just like with the urban war zone, the ruined corner we just did, these sides, they're kind of a little plain, they're kind of a little flat. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to coat them with PVA glue, or you could use Mod Podge or something else if you wanted to. We're going to use PVA glue, and then we're going to just sprinkle sand all over it, texture the whole thing up, and then we'll let it dry so I can paint it in a future episode with you guys. All right, so time to coat this guy in glue and then put sand all over it so we can get that nice texture that we want. It's going to really help in that painting phase that's coming up. So there we go, all nice and coated. A key thing that I will do when I'm doing this is try to go as light on the coat as possible and try to keep it just where I want it. It can be difficult, but we're just trying to texture. We're not trying to like base or flock. We don't even necessarily care if sand sticks to everything. We just want enough sand to stick so it's not a blank, boring surface when we paint it. There you have it. The texture is on the sides. I haven't figured out what I'll do with the base. Definitely cover several different basing options in a future episode as I kind of figure out what I'm going to do with it. This was the first terrain segment on the Bloody Road to Mordheim. Definitely have many more planned in the pipeline. I have an entire table that I've got to figure out, so I've got to start pumping terrain out for it. If you found this terrain tutorial helpful, liked it, followed along, let us know down in the comments, and also hit that like and subscribe button. If you would like to support the channel and help it grow, you can do so over at Patreon at www.patreon.com/underthehiveofmadness. Need something to listen to while you hobby, build terrain, and do other things in the Warhammer or Warhammer 40k hobby? Check out Under the Hive of Madness. We are a Warhammer 40k and creative writing podcast. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time.